Welcome back to the Win with Dice podcast, a podcast featuring members of the Win with Dice team. I'm Calvin, and I'm joined here by Ramon.
Hey guys, welcome to the Win with Dice podcast. Podcast all about tabletop RPGs, running them, playing them. Calvin and I run several games and are in several games. We're just trying to distill our experience into something that you guys can, take to your table. And, maybe from what we, say about our experience about running the game, that you would want to jump in on the other side of the screen and give it a try yourself. And that's the whole point of the podcast. So I'm glad you're here and listening.
Yeah, definitely. We want to take a casual approach to running tabletop RPGs to hopefully get people to give it a try, see it's not so scary. Of course, if you have any specific questions about running games or ideas and concepts you want us to talk about, just drop in a comment below or hit us up on Twitter at WinWithDice, or even on our website we have a form where you can submit a message if you want us to talk about a particular thing.
Yeah.
So you got a few topics we want to cover today, some discussion things that we can sort of circle around, but before we get to those, we got to get to the most important part of the show, which is the Win with Dice weekly GM tip of the week.
Yes, the Win with Dice weekly GM tip of the week, brought to you by Ramon. Actually, we played in a game. Tim's Pathfinder. Was it Mines of Feldever? Is that what it is? Is that what that 5e adventure we're playing?
Oh yeah, the adventure is called Mines of Fandelver. Yes.
Yeah, I was gonna say Path of Tim Delver. That's like what it was in my head.
Well, I mean, it's kind of straight from the original name, but I guess you have the spirit of it.
Well, it's Tim's pretty much making it his own. So to me, it's like we're not playing Mines of Feldever, we're playing Mines of Tim Delver because it's like it's his thing, which is super cool, and we're enjoying it. We might not get into the recap today. We'll probably save it for next week, but we had tons of fun. Definitely always a blast to play with Tim. But there was one point during the session where, for 45 minutes, the entire table just got really obsessed with the create water spell because we were reading it and we thought it was so hilarious that it specifically said that if this water isn't consumed within 24 hours, it evaporates, right? And then we're just started asking a billion questions, okay, well, what if you put it in food? What if you're just carrying it? What if you water a plant? Stuff like that, right? And that kind of side conversation went on for a while. We were all having fun. We're all talking about it, but there's always the thing because time's so precious these days, right? Getting everyone organized. Our game actually is across several time zones, right? So getting everybody together is always we only have a short window of time to play, and having that time being eaten up with flim-flam is kind of tough, right? Because you want to get as much in while you have the people here. So my tip of the week is actually, as a DM, when that happens, let the players talk, let the players get it out. It's always fun when people are focused on the game, but sometimes you need to get that little bit of a break, right? Being on for 4 hours is a lot, right? A whole session, right? It's like doing a day job. Sometimes people's minds wander because you're just doing the same thing. Sometimes it's not engaging for that player. Sometimes they just need a break to crack a couple jokes with their friends because you're all here to hang out with each other. You're all here to spend time with each other because you like each other, right? It just so happens that we're playing a tabletop RPG versus anything else. So yeah, give your players time to talk. If it's 10 minutes, 10 minutes. If it's 40 minutes, whatever you feel comfortable and everyone's happy, then we're good. And then, as soon as that conversation comes to a close, or as soon as you're okay, we should probably get going, then wrap things up, and then the players will be just right back on it, right? I would say they would be even more engaged because, having the little bit of relief of just not role playing or something like that might be good for some players, or having that time where it's oh man, we just defeated a really hard fight and we're all dead. Right? It's we need a little bit of a mental break to get into the next bit of it. So yeah, a little bit of levity
helps people to stay focused on what they're doing, or just a little bit of a break between what that one train of thought sometimes tells people to get back on it. Sometimes you do want to get it back on track, and usually what I would do is just wait until things seem to be petering out, and then it's okay, let's get back to it. But yeah, let people have their fun. That's what you're kind of there for, right?
For sure. And use that time where you're not, narrating or you're not interacting with them to plan ahead. Maybe reread your notes, maybe like make some adjustments that you don't have to do like during the middle of something, like, on those those times where you're not on screen, right? You're not like, you could just go and, maybe tweak things or add things or just check things. So that's my tip of the week.
Yeah.
Guys, pretty simple. If players are goofing off, let them goof off and you take a break.
That's a good time to write notes, not gonna lie. If they're talking amongst themselves, whether it's on topic or RPing, that's a good time to like actually put details into your notes that you scramble together.
That is true. As a person who never takes notes, that's probably a good idea.
Well, that's advice for you then.
The problem is like I never actually do this own advice because like in the flim flam I also want to be in it, so it's like really hard to like step away from it when something ridiculous, a ridiculous conversation is happening. I'm like, oh yes, please let me give my thoughts on this silliness, right? Like, so
yeah, I don't mind being in the background sometimes because that's perfect time for me to get stuff done. But yeah.
There you go, folks. That's your Women Dice Weekly Gym Tip of the Week, brought to you by Ramon. Yeah, one day we're gonna get a sponsor, and
are we?
I hope so. That would be pretty
fun.
Cool. Yeah, if anyone wants to sponsor us, let us know. We'll definitely do that, and then we'll add it to this segment. It would be like, you watch sports. I don't watch sports, but like, when you watch sports, that they have like the ad, it's like, oh yes, this is the McDonald's touchdown, and it's like, we can do that.
The Blue Apron Tip of the Week.
Yeah, it'd be so good. Brought to you by Blue Apron. Blue Apron, sponsor us. I don't even know. I might not even do it for the money. I think I would just do it for the fun of being sponsored.
This Tip of the Week is brought to you by Raid Shadow Legends.
Oh, that would be the best. Raid, don't listen to our other podcasts where I talk shit about you. Sponsor us.
Well, just in case, maybe we should go on to the main topic of the show.
All right.
So we do have some leftover Twitter questions we haven't covered yet. Again, these are just things that people have added us with on Twitter. I will try to, on the regular, post a thing that people can just reply to and say, hey, I want to hear about such and such thing. And then I make a list, and then when we're fishing for topics, then we have that big old barrel to go through. Some of them we don't get to right away, but we do keep a list of everything that people have said. And this is us getting to some things on that list. For example, from Siege Fault, how to manage narrative focus. Figuring out when you're in the spotlight and when you're in the background for another player, or when you're just sort of along for the GM's ride. So this is more of a player-focused discussion topic. And I think that's kind of a matter, like, it's a matter of, like, just keeping an eye on what's going on and who it's in relation to. Because there are certainly going to be some things that are focused on a single character, whether it's, like, backstory stuff or ongoing stuff to do with whatever their particular deal is, that, you might not be particularly involved in. A conversation between a PC and an NPC that you might not be part of, even if your character is, like, physically present. Mm-hmm. And there's other things where, like, a GM might be describing a scene, that they might be getting to that specific, like, if you have a specific thing you want to know about, sometimes you can just let them describe what's going on and then ask that question, because their description might cover that question as well.
Yeah, for sure. So, like, managing narrative focus, it's like, I think that, like, I always think of it as like who's in the scene, right? Mm-hmm. Like, where is the camera? And then I usually kind of borrow it from like TV shows where there's a plot, B plot. So like in those like narrative heavy moments where everybody isn't like in a combat or doing something together, even in those situations, there's like A plot, B plot, right? So it's like, it's always trying to like kind of be even with it. And, maybe those players who don't really want to I should say like role play, or doesn't really care about it so much, like they like it, but it's not like the drive for them for the game. A lot of the times it's like, putting bodies in the dirt. That's what they want to do. I think it'd be cool to like maybe try and pair those people up. Pair the narrative centric focus person, like that actor, with that, you know, tactical person, right? Put them together and let them go deal with a situation, right? I mean, everyone's friends at the table, and maybe that could have some cool character interaction because, you know, in one instance, the narrative focused player can lead the scene. The other one could be supportive because, you know, they also want to be involved too, right? Because stuff's going on, right? You want to play the game. You want to roll some dice, right? I think for the tactical player, when they're not rolling dice, they're like, where's the fun? I want to see the numbers, doc. Right? So, you know, with that thing, that would, you know, urge that kind of person to be like, okay, I don't need to be the lead. I don't need to be, you know, thinking strategically. I can just relax and maybe take the supporting role in that one, right? And then vice versa, because like that narrative person or that person who's just more into the story is like, when you switch to tactical combat, if your game system has that, right, then maybe that narrative person would possibly look to that other player who's the more tactical person, because they already had, like, their characters had that bond, their players had that interaction, so they might actually follow that person's lead, right? They were like, okay, like, what are we doing, right? I think it's just, you know, building those little interactions, but breaking it down to like maybe like, you know, player on player NPC, right, kind of deal, like pairing off people, putting them in a situation, and then, you know, getting those little character interactions going, because that's what happens in like stories or movies or TV shows, right? You always have like two people who don't know each other do a thing together, and now they're best friends. Right? Yeah. Right. You know, and I think it happens several times. Like in Pirate Campaign, I think that when everyone decided to split off, which I'm always a big fan of splitting the party. Everyone's like, don't ever split the party, but like splitting the party is hilarious. Yes, you are. Yeah. I think it's the best idea all the time, because you get to do A plot, B plot, and you know, you can as like a player, you can just chill and watch like basically like you're watching the show or something, right? You're watching somebody else go through the motions, and you know, you're just like, you're not, there's no stakes for you, so you get to just enjoy all the stuff that happens. Yeah, so in the Pirate Campaign, when you guys were, I don't know, beating up some pirates, I think it was the Grasses boys, when you guys were hired to deal with this pirate encampment, you know, Ray and Rain, the druid and the barbarian, decided to like, well, we're just gonna light the cabin on fire where all the pirates are sleeping, and just be like, all right, that's done, right? Well, you guys are like, okay, we'll go explore like the main like headquarters, essentially, right? The main house, which is like this half of a entire galley or something like that. Ridiculous, I said. Right? That was just washed up, and you're like, yes, this is where the headquarters is, which is kind of cool, because you had an interaction where two people who like are kind of chaotic and kind of just want to see the world burn a little bit, just like had fun and not had to worry about crazy emotional stuff, and two characters from like, you know, who are vying for leadership, like were interacting with each other, and you know, so there's crazy revelations in Helen's backstory, right? Helen and Misty, like Helen's backstory, and Misty was there to witness it all, right? And everything was like really weird and deep, and Misty was like, yo, you okay, bro? Like, you know, normally you guys have a little bit of an antagonistic relationship, but in that moment, like Misty was like, man, like shit's kind of rough right now. Right? And I would say that from that point on, you know, the rivalry was a little bit like intensified, but it was a little bit more playful. And then, you know, the bond between like Ray and Rain really kind of deepened. So now, like when Ray does something ridiculous, Rain is more likely to jump in and follow through with it, and vice versa, right? So then it's like, you know, that kind of thing. And then, you know, there's a whole love triangle between like an NPC, Missy's character, and Ray's character. So when Missy does something, Ray's gonna follow, and then Rain's probably gonna follow, and then Helen's there, who's like, oh man, I have to be in charge, so I'm gonna do a thing, and then Missy's like, no, I'm in charge, and then all of a sudden it's like a big loop and everybody's interacting with each other, and everybody's kind of sharing the spotlight, and you have a bunch of A and B plots going on, and that's kind of how you do it.
Yeah, it definitely helps that we're a group of people who like to do the character stuff, so I think it's a lot easier for us to sometimes sit back when it's not us doing the character thing. Just let other people have their moments. That's again the thing I talk about all the time, just being a fan of other people's characters.
Yeah, that's another way to kind of allow the spotlight to be on somebody, right? Just be a fan of them. Like if you're a player at the table, like let's say like you're not so like you're nervous about role playing, right? Or you don't feel like you're interested. Just if you want to get into it, just pick a character and be like, that's my buddy. Like if he's doing something, I'm in it too, right? Or like that guy's the leader. Whatever he's doing, I'm gonna do it too, because that's what like people like people in real life, right? It's like we're always trying to like bring it back to like reality. It's like you're like your friends are into something, like you're probably into it too. You'll give it a shot, right? So like go get into trouble with your friends.
Yeah, definitely. I do think game mechanics might also help in that, because definitely Helen and Misty being a team, them being good at stealth really like contributed to that. So that's another way that the game can help you like do those things.
Yeah, and the A and Blue Pot too. It because like you're not the sole person and everybody else is watching you, because you're able to divide the, like, instead of it being like a 2-hour, like for instance like a 2-hour narrative block of role playing or whatever, right? It's like because of A and B plot, you only really need to be on for like an hour, then you have an hour off. So those players who like get really tired of that interaction, or like that tired of like they want to do it but they get drained from it, right? Like they can have a break, right? Splitting the party is always good. Splitting the scene is always good. They get to just have a break and just chill. Some people just want to relax, right?
Yeah. So what about what about times when you're dealing with something that's like directly to do with a certain character's backstory? Like how often do you, I mean, like both as a player and as a GM trying to like split focus and everything, like how would you deal with that? Because I'm just thinking of, because Critical Role is always in my mind, and they have that new animated show coming out on like the 27th or 28th, and it's gonna be like the first like arc of their game, and a big chunk of it was very focused on a certain character's backstory, which I'm really excited for because it was my favorite part of the first campaign. I was just thinking about that, and it's like, well, how does the spotlight work in that situation? Because technically it's like specifically on that person, but you don't want it to be on them all the time, right? And I guess I don't really feel like it was the case in that game. I'm just kind of wondering like how you feel about that, or how you would handle that sort of thing.
It happens all the time, actually. Helen in the Pirate campaign is a good example of like somebody who, if their backstory shows up, like it takes over the whole thing, right?
Yeah, kind of. It's because we're on the sea so often. She's a pirate.
I know. I mean, if actually, to be fair, if you didn't invent Helen and I didn't give you a boat, I think most of the stuff like wouldn't come up. But that's just how it is, right? It might have been like Ray or Rain if you guys are just like stuck in Uranus, right? They're stuck on the land and running away from stuff. But now you're on the sea, you can do whatever you want. It just so happens that Helen's the sea lady, so like she gets all the attention when they're back on the sea, right?
Right.
But I think that like you have to figure out what your players like at that point, like what their character's all about, because like maybe you're following the thread of like Helen's backstory through her family and stuff like that, but Helen doesn't actually want anything bad to happen or any more revelations, right? She's just like in it for the ride. So that person's is like, you as the player, you're like, fuck, I wish that I didn't know that Helen had such a tragic backstory or whatever, right? Or this is unfolding the way it is, right? So it's actually a little traumatic for you, right? or for Helen, right? Like the whole last thing with all of the sea hags, right? Like learning that you're cursed, learning that the sea hags wanted to eat you, learning all sorts of nonsense. Then and Helen's just like, God damn it, right? While Ray or Rain got to haggle with some sea hags, try to convince them to be a part of like her coven, like try to take over an entire sea hag coven by herself, like a mad lady, right? That was in it for her, right? She like Abby has always expressed to me like, oh yes, I want to be like a fairy mermaid princess, and to be a princess you need like a following. And I was like, okay, well, you got to figure out how you're gonna get followers, man, because that's the only way like you can be a princess, right? You gotta have people to lord over her. So she's like, oh yes, okay. So anytime there's like an opportunity for her to be like, I'm in charge now, she's gonna try, right?
Right.
Except for the boat. She doesn't care about the boat.
So she cares about one person on the boat.
That is true. She's really funny. She's been bugging me to be like, hey, when is this love story is gonna go full circle, man? Why are you blue balling me here, man? Like, we're just I don't know, like. I was like, listen, it'll happen. I have a very specific moment, okay? The very specific meet cute.
They've already met.
No, but it's like, okay, you met somebody. Like, listen, romantic comedies all the time. Your coworker, you've been working for years. You guys are just friends, and then all of a sudden, just bam.
Okay, I see. So it's gotta be like a slow burn until the moment.
Right, like they're interested to each other, but like, you know, they haven't like had like Jasper hasn't had the courage yet because Rain is super hot, and he's like, oh man, and he's really conflicted because it's like, you know, Jasper has his brother Helen, like you like his family's on the boat, but then this person obviously is gonna take him off the boat, right? You know what I mean? It's like really serious. Like Jasper's like the second in command. He takes his job very seriously. Right, so yeah, he's conflicted. He's a conflicted man. That's why Jasper hasn't pulled the trigger yet on anything, even though like they keep flirting with each other. Complications. Anyway, so you know, Ray and Rain. Ray got to beat up a shark, and Ray got to beat up a shark. Misty got to be a badass and basically got the final blow on the shark too, saving everybody actually. And then the two of them got to go on like the stealth mission to go and like commando their way into the Sea Hag Coven cave, right? To go and basically rescue you guys. And then we had a cool moment again with the splitting of the party and the A plot, B plot. We had, you know, I had Misty and Ray like basically had a scene where they were just stealthing through and they were like, you know, taking out like I forget what they're called, but like they're like Triton guards. They're the guards that were there. They were like basically just like, you know, taking them out and moving through while I had like you guys strung up and basically captured, and the villains were monologuing at you guys. And so like one moment it was a very tense, like, are we gonna get found out before we're able to rescue you, like get into the room where you guys are? And then we had a moment where like, you know, you're interrogating the bad guy, like I was giving up information to you guys and you guys were like, you know, spitting back at the bad guy, and it was like a cool plot like revelation moment right over there. Like I was dumping lore and stuff on one side while everybody else had this tense sneaking moment on the other side. And then, you know, throughout the session, like when the two A plot and B plot connected, that's when the final battle happened, when like, you know, you're in the room, you guys, all the you know, the people who are captured on one side, the bad guys are in the middle, and then, you know, the rescuers are on the other side, and then the fight started, and then everybody kind of just like there was all sorts of funny, like, you know, hectic nonsense, because, you know, you get 12 hags / witches in a room, like shit's gonna get weird, which everyone had fun with.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean,
yeah. So everyone can still do a thing, even if you're dealing with like one particular person's story.
Exactly, right? Yeah. So like, you know, think about the backstory and think about like how, like what is the quest or what is the action plan of that backstory, right? Like what are you trying to, what is the plot line, and then how could the rest of the party fit into it, right? I mean, like, let's say you're a fighter and you're like, or like your backstory has to do with killing a monster. Then, you know, other players who are interested in monster killing would be invested in your backstory, right? Versus like, you know, I don't know, maybe you're like the heir to some rich family's wealth. Then the rogue in the party is gonna be like, money? I'll help you with money. Like whatever you need, man.
This is rogue slander.
You know, so it's always that kind of thing. It's like you're just kind of like your character has like their own backstory, but they also have their own like things that they like, right? Like motivations that they're just like that what they. I guess the thing that would be like their forks, I guess. It would be like, you know, like maybe in your backstory, like someone's dealing with a knife, but that knife could be also dealt with a fork, like forks and knives. There we go. Aha. Metaphors. Yeah, right.
Okay. I guess it sort of
Yeah.
covers what I was curious about. Look, I definitely had to do the thing where, especially in the last few sessions for some of my games, where we're dealing with like character background stuff, but other people still have a chance to interact with all of that and learn about all their fun past stories.
Yeah, you could also just, smush them together. Like maybe their backstory is more connected than they originally thought, right? Like maybe like it doesn't have to be 100% connected. It could be tangential, right? Like maybe one NPC and they share a common NPC, interaction in their background, or maybe it could even be a place, right? Like you oft like in your game, it's very centralized. It's very much like a road trip game, right? So like everything is like on the map. So it's like if you put like two player background relevant things close to each other, then all of a sudden they're connected, because the inherent nature of geographically locations being close together, they're going to have some interaction between those two places.
Yeah, maybe.
Right?
I should have thought of that, but they're all from like different time periods, but whatever.
Well, I mean, even just getting from one to the other, like, so you had that quest to go to the north, right? To go to that that basically that team meeting, right?
Yeah.
Like for the witches, right?
Yeah.
The witch team meeting, right? But on the journey, because you have made them go all the way south and all the way north, there was a point where you guys had to stop and go to the fighter's hometown and deal with the fighter's background. And I don't know if they were close, but in my mind, they were like, you were telling me, I don't actually remember what your map looked like, but just the fact that the route took you there, you were like, everybody was thinking about the witch's backstory or dealing with that, but also like, oh, we can stop and deal with this right now, right? So it's like, it's still all connected, kind of. Yeah.
Yeah, there's still there's still plenty of room for, like I said, like for everyone to still interact with it. I don't know. One other thing though, I guess from the player's perspective when sharing Spotlight, that's something I sometimes worry about. Is like, am I talking too much here? Should I not be talking as much as I am right now? I don't know if I do that. It's very hard to tell sometimes. I don't know what I would say to a player who does that, other than, I don't know, just be chill. Interact when you need to.
Or like, when you do want to interact, don't just interact with the GM. Interact with the player, like players at the table, right?
Yeah.
It's like you could play the Spotlight in a conversation with another player, and that's getting them to be involved, right? Like if you think about it, like the interactions, most times it's one player GM, right? But if you get like another player involved into your schemes as the player who wants to be in the spotlight, then all of a sudden it's like you and somebody else is in the spotlight getting into trouble, right? It's now you're bringing more people. It's more of like, and then if you rope the entire table into doing something, then all of a sudden, yes, because you instigated it, everyone else has to deal with it, and everyone else gets the fun of being in the spotlight. Like, we could all be in the spotlight at the same time. You guys are all on the stage instead of everyone just being like, not actually participating, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Throw it to other players. I think that's good advice.
Ah, yes. Throw it to other players. That's like the sum. I like that one. That's a good summary of it.
That's our second tip of the week.
Ah, the super secret second tip of the week. Thanks, Calvin.
Okay. So hopefully that covers what Siege was asking, because we do have another question from them about how to manage player experience, because some players don't want to try to figure out like a mystery or whodunit or whatever. Some just want to be along for the ride. Others want to have social interactions. Others might want high kill counts. So how do you manage all those sorts of things? Because I just try to have like a balance of RP and combat stuff. Because I know some people are going to be into the tactical stuff. Some people are going to want to use their cool new abilities. Some people are going to be want to interact with characters. So I guess trying to have like a balance of all of those things, and trying to do it like time-wise as well. Because I know combat just takes up like a big chunk of time. And that's fine for the people who like to do the tactical stuff. That's fine for the people who are like, I got a new spell, so I'm looking forward to using it. How do I use it in this situation? How do I use tree shape in this combat?
Stop with the tree shape.
You know, so yeah, I guess also trying to balance different genres of story, because sometimes, you want to throw a mystery or a puzzle or something in there just to like mix it up a bit, so you don't fall into the trap of everything feeling so repetitive, or like you're doing the same things over and over again, or it's just like the constant, here's some RP, here's some combat, here's some RP, here's some combat. Just throwing new things in, even in a new setting, can really help with that sort of thing, to try to get everybody to have the experience they're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, definitely, but you could have situations where there's no right answer, or you have to get multiple right answers, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, maybe you throw a puzzle into, or like a mystery to solve, but at the same time, like you're trying to solve the mystery, but there's also like a combat going on, right? So the player who wants to just do combat can just do the combat and deal with that portion of the scenario, and the person who's interested in the mystery can just go do that, right? Or like maybe there is a little bit of combat, but because the combat's going well or not, then like maybe you switch to a narrative kind of moment, or like even in combat you could have narrative moments, like opening up that that space where it's like, okay, well, my character wants to do this and like break some rules, then just let them break the rules for a little bit, right? If it's not too crazy, right? If whatever you feel as a GM on the table feels comfortable with, right? Opening that kind of space. So now instead of it being like hard numbers, now it's just like, okay, what, like, solutions to problems.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's tough to give players what they want, but I think like if you have like your session 0, or like even just like the pitch to the players, I think we mentioned that a while ago, and I the idea of like let your players know ahead of time what's the expectations of the game, right? It's like you don't just like book covers and like trailers exist, right? So you can know like what's in an experience before you get into it, right? So like at the beginning of the game, like maybe set out some ground rules of like, this is kind of the game that like I'm trying to play. Like you're playing like, it's like, well, this one's going to be like more combat focused, or I want to play a more narrative focus, or like things are going to be kind of gritty, or things are going to be high fantasy, or like, things might get uncomfortable, right? Like those kind of conversations you have before we start playing the game. So then players' expectations aren't, misaligned with yours. Right. And the flow of like combat narrative is pretty good. I mean, also you could have a whole bunch of strings of combat for a while, and then you as a GM would want to take a break and go do some narrative stuff, right? Like have a couple sessions of narrative stuff, like, or have like a puzzle and just kind of break it up. I think it's hard because there's no hard and fast rules for it. It's like based on the table. Like the pirate campaign group is like different from the Inion group, which is different from the Lancer group, right? Like they're all very different. It depends on the players and the game that you're playing and all that kind of stuff. But if you are able to switch gears, like have a little bit of everything in a session, you got to kind of remember the core things of like what makes this game kind of fun. It's always like go somewhere cool, talk to someone cool, learn something cool, fight something cool, right? Like if you're able to do a couple of those things in a session, like you're doing fine. Maybe if your players aren't having as much fun, maybe just talk to them as well, right? Just be like, hey, like maybe a player is like dissatisfied with the game, be like, hey, like, do you like what can I do as a GM to make the experience better for you? And then maybe if you just can't because it'll change the nature of the story you're trying to tell or the game you're trying to run, then just be like, sorry man, I think you gotta go find another table, or like maybe you can sit out for a little bit until maybe you get to a point where you're comfortable to come back in, or like because sometimes it's just like it's just not gonna work, right? Like I can't make a romance like a romance comedy novel or whatever into like a World War II mecha show. But I think that actually exists. But anyway, that was a bad example. This just sounds like anime. But
no, yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah. I think a lot of it is communication. Even stuff that's being done like unconsciously. Like if players seem especially excited about something, I feel like that's still a form of communication. If they're like, oh, I'm really looking forward to doing this thing at some point in the future, then make sure you have that thing like in your preparations. Make sure to have that thing ready to go. If they say that they want to do something, then try to figure out how to help them get there. And if they just directly say, hey, I want to do this, then, I mean, that's just like the blunt right up front. You know what to work on if you can manage to fit it into the kind of campaign you're currently running.
Yeah, I talk to my players all the time and be like, was that fun? Like, did you enjoy yourself? Like, what was the cool part of it? And then just do that again. Like, it's kind of like it's an evolving thing. Like, you don't just like become a DM. You're constantly trying to improve and constantly trying to make the fun happen at the table, right? So
yeah, you always want your game to be as good as possible, and I think that requires like that feedback loop, so you know what people are actually looking for and what you're actually putting out.
Yeah.
Okay, so
thanks again. Thanks, Siege. You gave us a lot of things to talk about. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So the last one we have here from Siege is knowing when to calm the heck down as a GM and stop creating massive battle set pieces that offer nothing other than spectacle rather than substance to your players. And I mean, I don't know. I don't have a problem with spectacle, if I'm being honest.
Well, I think it's when you take away agency from the players, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I think the idea is like, it's like playing a video game level versus like watching a cutscene, right? It's like you're just kind of watching your character who you've been like, the way that you've been using them the entire time it's up to you, but now you're just the choices out of your hands, right? It's always like giving it back to the players, right? Like making the players like involved more, because there was not to like throw like any shade at like Steven. One time my friend Steven, he came on the podcast a while ago. Actually, I should probably get him back on. But he ran a Lancer session for us where it was like a really, really big battle, right? Like between like two starships, and it was like or like a space station and an invading starship, and there was like this big energy force field thing around the starship, so we couldn't actually draw a line of sight past this one point. And then there was like our Lancers, and then we had like the enemy Lancers, and then there was like 50 just grunts on both sides, right? Something ludicrous. It was just like a crazy amount of just trash nothing, right? Because you're trying to have that experience of like, this is a climactic huge battle, there's tons of things in your way, right? There's just enemies everywhere, right? We're just it's the you're in like the final arc of your Gundam episode or Gundam series, and it's like the big climactic battle, and there's like Gundams dying left, right, and center, right? Mobiles is dying left, right, and center. That's kind of the idea that he was going for, but because of the scale and because of everything, it was like, oh my god, there was just so much chaff to go through, and there was just so much NPC turns. Like, NPCs didn't get like every individual NPC didn't get their own turn, but anytime like a player could be targeted by an enemy NPC, like they would have to make all the rolls, right? Mm-hmm. It would just be like, they all attack them or whatever, or a bunch of NPCs are in the way, so then we have to deal with it.
So right? It's just like a lot of stuff like, on the combat field is what you're.
Oh yeah, okay. It was a lot of stuff. It was a very much like what Siege was describing, where a big set piece battle where it's like a bunch of nonsense. But I think there was a bunch of cool things going on, right? Like there were several goals. It was like we had to survive for one. We had to beat all the Lances, but specifically our job was to go and disable the force field, right? Like get onto the enemy ship so we can stop them. So, you know, there were several things where like, okay, well, we have to clear the traff. That's like one objective. We have to defend and possibly defeat some of the Lancers that were there. And then we had to get to the ship and disable the force field, right? So like, and we had to do it within a specific time frame so the space station doesn't get overwhelmed, right? So it was like, it was a really, really cool scenario. But I think that like the execution was kind of off, because I also did the same thing where it was like when you guys were fighting I forget what I called the ship, when you guys had that ship fight, when you had the battleship scenario mission or whatever, or encounter, where like you guys are fighting a giant ship, right? But like you also had like a bunch of NPCs and there was a bunch of other enemy NPCs, and it's like, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on and there's a lot of time in between player turns, and there's a lot of rolling on my part, you know. And I think that like what you got to do is like pull back your NPC interactions of those big set piece, pull back those like things where it's like out of the player's control, rein those aspects in and let the players deal with the problem themselves, right? And let the players have more agency in the situation. Just always trying to get back to the player's turn as soon as possible. And anytime you're like, I want to use a friendly NPC, to me it's like just axe that like don't like use it, but like don't either give it to another player, or like instead of it making it be a like, I guess I should say like a tactical piece on the board, make it be like a scenario interaction.
Like
I'm always like
thing.
The narrative, always like if you have reinforcements, have them come in and like maybe do a bunch of damage to the enemy, or have them come in and give boosts to the party, you know, just like anything else than them actually being on the board.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. If you know you're gonna do that big battle like that, you're gonna have a bunch of friendly NPCs. Why not just give them to the players? That's definitely something that I've gone with as a player. That's definitely something that I've dealt with a couple of times on the Untold Stories project games. Like these big battles when we're in another dimension, and actually both of them were other dimensions, but they were pretty big battles, and there were a whole bunch of other people there. So yeah, we would just control like a couple of characters against like a massive enemy, so then that reduces, you know, the number of, here's an NPC fighting another NPC. It's still like a player doing a thing. Yeah.
Also, I think it would be pretty cool if like instead of it being like, you could zoom out too, right? Like let's say instead of like in Stevenson, obviously like we talked about it afterwards, and actually this is like the scenario he went us through was actually the very final encounter of like a campaign. So like the idea would be like, you know, this massive battle will happen, but then you know, players, right, like other, like the players NPC like friendly NPCs that they made, all of those interactions that they had, all those resources they built up all the way to this point, they would come in and aid, right? So then, you know, you call in a friendly NPC ship will show up like to relieve some, like, you know, get like a flank or something like that. Like all those cool interactions will come in, like all the stuff that the players earned during the campaign comes into the set piece, and then it becomes like, now the players or have more agency in the situation, right? They're like, oh, thank God I made that friend like 5 sessions ago or whatever. He's coming to help me out now.
Yeah. So that would be like adding substance to the spectacle then.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Or like specifically like player driven like resources, right? It's always like the players ally NPCs, the players forethought, right? It's like you could have a crazy big set piece, but if the players don't get to put anything into the scene, and it's all just you, then it becomes boring.
Yeah.
Right. To be fair, I think Steven actually does this a lot. I also did that too. When during the Pirate campaign, when Alinea got blown up by Smitherex, that was a huge set piece moment. But instead of it being like, I don't know, this weird climactic battle, it was lots of scenes. It was like running because this dragon's blowing up the place. Then all of a sudden, bad guys show up and you guys are fighting in the alley while the place is blowing up, right? Then cut back after you defeat everybody to like Smitherex destroying some other shit. You guys finally get to where the bad guy is, right? Have that interaction with the bad guy and have that crazy tense moment with the bad guy, and then Smither X comes and just blows up everything, and then everyone's trying to run away again, right? Yeah. It's like you still, even though it's like technically it's like one big set piece, right? You just break it up. Like I'm always down to break up things into smaller chunks than spending a long time in one thing, doing one thing, right?
Yeah, that makes it more likely you can actually get to the different like high points you actually intend to reach instead of trying to fit them all into one scenario.
Yeah. As well, another cool thing you could do for, I guess, if you're adding NPCs, like instead of putting them on the board, just make like, I don't know, like the idea would be like in that scenario with Steven's game, it's like, well, maybe instead of it being like your one character, just make yourself a group, right? Just your character counts as like 5 characters or something like that, right? Like just make the scale different, mm-hmm. right? So like, maybe you're flying with your one mech, but you have a bunch of chaff mechs with you, right? Because you're leading a team, and as like you maybe give them some sort of extra ability, or maybe they can just do some like reliable damage or something like that. But as like you guys fight it out, it's like you can describe as like your chaff mechs or your buddies just get picked off one by one until it's only like you and the enemy mech left, right? And it could be a cool thing where it's like, well, maybe at the end, if you can always choose to have like your chaff buddies get hit, but maybe at the end of the combat, if you saved all of your chaff buddies, they like you more, and you get like an extra thing because you made the game harder for yourself. Like I gave you like an extra, basically a bunch of extra HP, but you decided not to use it, so here's some reward for it, right? And like maybe it gives like the ruthless player an avenue to be like, lol, I don't care about these guys, I'm the best. Or you get the compassionate player to be like, man, I really don't want anyone to die. I'm gonna try and save them as much as possible, right? That kind of deal. And then all of a sudden now you have like more stakes that the player cares about, or more like input, because the conclusion of that fight, it's like you can really have more of like a narrative impact to it than just like a bunch of crazy shit happen. Yeah,
I mean, you could definitely still like have that same spectacle, just as long as there's something that the players care about within it. Like I was just trying to think back to some of the more difficult combats that I've gone through or that I ran, and it's usually like it's the tail end of like, this is the boss fight of this guy who might have like killed another player before, or this is the final boss of this dungeon who has someone like kidnapped down here, and they're the next part of this leg of your quest that you're on. Just something that makes it less of a just another thing in your way. Like have a reason to have the boss music playing, but that's more than just this thing is a couple levels higher than you are.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, yeah, so you had another thing that you wanted to talk about today that you were sort of explaining to me, and I don't know if I fully got it, so...
Yeah, so I've been thinking about getting back into fighting games, and so I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos about fighting games and stuff like that. But other than, execution, and like, getting good at pressing the buttons and doing the stuff, it's like... It's also like a psychological game right now. I was trying to think of like how can I take something from another genre of game and bring it into tabletop RPGs. I'm always like trying to do that, because I think like other games have good ideas, so I want to steal them. But because that psychological aspect of fighting is because you are playing another person, it translates to tabletop RPGs, because even though like there's not really a thing of like execution, because everything's already laid out, right? Like you only can do everything that's there, like you have perfect knowledge of what's going on, right? But you are still playing another person, right? There is that emotional aspect towards it. So to really kind of in that like tactical combat kind of thing, like you can also, there's a thing called conditioning, right? So it's like you do a move, you put a move out in fighting games and you spam it a whole bunch. And so you like say like a fireball or something like that, and you're basically trying to get your opponent to like jump. Essentially, you're trying to bait them into jumping, right? Because they're blocking, they're getting frustrated. you get them to jump, and as soon as they jump, boom, you hit them with the anti-air and you start your combo. That's kind of the idea. It's like you're trying to condition your opponent to do something and get them to do something, and that's just like a part of the fighting game. And like you could do that on like the board as well, right? Like, you know, you can really goad people into situations because you are playing other players, right? There is emotions attached to it. There is, you know, frustration attached to it. So like, you know, you can obviously use your I don't know, your monster's tool belt or whatever to get people into a frustrating situation, or get people into doing something that they're not you know, conditioning them to do something that you want them to do, like basically just tricking them, right? Like, you know, as weird as it sounds, it's like the barbarian, right? Like you want, like the barbarian will move forward and hit stuff, like, you know, that they'll do that, but they will also try and, like, you know, I would say if they would also either want to try to fight the biggest thing because, you know, they're the biggest thing, or they're going to try and fight the weakest thing because, you know, usually that's how you beat it, like rock beats scissors, right? So you can goad them in with the character being like, oh yeah, I'm like this squishy little wizard, come over here and fight me, big boy. And then you get them over there and all of a sudden you just slap them with something that will just completely paralyze them, or like, oh yeah, you're, you know, confused, or like, oh man, whatever, right? Because, you know, they're thinking that, oh yeah, this wizard's, I'm just gonna get him, or this wizard's gonna, you know, do some fireball or something, I'm just gonna get him first. But then all of a sudden this thing has like another ability, or like you go them into a situation and then all of a sudden the friends surround that guy and then now just tie him up or something, you know, like you can do stuff like that, as well as like utilize like traps and stuff like that, positioning, like all sorts of nonsense to get your players to be in situations that is not just standard and is like, oh man, I gotta think and get out of here, I gotta figure out what resources to use. You know, kind of digging into that emotional aspect of like the drama of fighting someone to the death. Right?
So like,
you know,
going off of their like expectations of what something will do in combat, or like putting like a pattern or something out there and then doing something unexpected when they figure out what it is.
Yeah, like sometimes you gotta hold your chips close to your chest. Like, don't just spam out the dragon's fire breath, right? Like, actually, I would say that, you know, lots of times if you're fighting something with like an area of attack, your players will spread out, and the fact that they're spreading out, right, you could isolate them and never ever use that area of effect spell. The fact that you even have it in your back pocket makes them worried, and they'll just not do that, right? Or if they do, then lol, I could just use it, right? It's like it's really like you have that. You never have to actually use everything in your tool belt for a monster for something to be scary. Just them having the knowledge of it, you can then use that to play into something else.
Okay,
right?
So it's just like your creatures adapting tactics based on how the players are reacting, because again, like, the creatures are smart, they want to win the battle. I can, like, it might be sometimes frustrating, but if the creatures know, hey, you're spread out, so now I can focus on one person, or hey, you're grouped together, so here's an area of effect attack, like, it's smart enough to know and do those things. I think it's
not even.
Yep.
Not even. You don't even have to. If they are grouped up, you don't even ever actually have to use the area attack. Like, just the fact that, you know, you can remind them. If you like take out like a ruler or whatever and like put it over the thing and be like, oh, okay, I could get, like, you know, 5 of you or whatever, right? And you're like, nah, it's okay, I'll do something else. The fact that you let them know that you have like a fireball at the ready changes their whole perspective of the fight. You know what I mean? Like, it's like psychological. It's like, oh shit, we have to spread out.
Oh, okay. It's like rolling a die randomly behind the GM screen for nothing at all, but just to make people worried.
Just to make people worried.
Not that I ever do that.
But it, even worse, because like they know exactly what's gonna happen, right? or even just like, you know, you have like some movement options, right? You're like, oh yeah, you know, nobody knows how fast this thing is, but if you take the ruler out and measure, like, oh, I can get away all over here. Now I'm gonna go over here instead, and they're gonna be like, what? What do you mean you could just get back here with me and my squishy wizard, right?
Maybe I should use that and make people, like, whenever someone thinks I'm making a mistake in how to run this creature, no, it's just I'm just backing you into a corner psychologically.
Yeah, actually, like, it's hilarious, especially when, you know, sometimes you have to show, you know, like a slightly good card to hide your real ace, right? Like that kind of thing, where it's like, you know, you're playing mind games with them, and that would be a cool way to spice up like tactical combat. Because I would argue that, you know, a lot of the time, like I would say, like, you know, D&D, Pathfinder, those fantasy role-playing games, they heavily rely on mono groups of enemies. So it's like you're always really fighting like a bunch of goblins, right? Or like a bunch of orcs, or like, but then it's like it's that and like a dragon, or like, you know, very rarely do you have like versus something like Lancer, where it's like, okay, you're fighting an assault and there's a sniper and then there's an Aegis, and it's like usually it's always like a group of specialists fighting a group of specialists, right? It's not the same in Pathfinder and Dungeons & Dragons. It's like, I mean, those fights are actually kind of rare, I think, unless you're actively trying to do that. If you follow most adventure paths, like, that's kind of how it is. But even in that kind of scenario, it's like you don't have to show all your cards, because it's like, you know, or it would be like, I think Matt Colville, so like Matt Colville mentioned in one of his episodes about his friend Jim Murphy and how he'd use the machine gun orc method. That's what I think of it as, where it's like you have a bunch of random mook NPCs, right? Like a bunch of orcs, right? Like 5 of them. And then you have like a corridor, and because the way the game works, how action economy is, you can move that orc, shoot, and then move that orc out of line of sight. And you can do that for every orc, right? You don't have to do it all the time, but the fact that you're able to just pinpoint somebody and shoot them full of like 10 arrows for whatever reason, that's something the players are going to be like, oh crap, I can't be the only one out of the open because I'm going to get singled out, right? And then all of a sudden everyone's movement becomes slower, everyone's trying to get cover, everyone's trying to get out of line of sight, and then now the game, you slow down their advance, and you might be able to outmaneuver them or get them in a bad situation. But you know it brings up the level of difficulty, just because you could show them like, listen, I have the weight of dice behind me, I can demolish somebody if I wanted to, but you know, if you don't play smart, I'm going to do that. But you don't actually have to do that, right? Just the fact that they know that you can weight of dice your way to kill somebody is more than enough to let players to be like, oh god, I am but a squishy boy, like I'm going to die, like I need to be more careful. And then, you know, as well as other things too, where it's like it might make players want to take more risks, because like, hey, if I can't actually get into a safe position, I'm gonna be heroic and, you know, Leroy Jenkins my way in, because if I don't, I'm gonna get, you know, machine gunned down with the arrows, right? So
cool. Either encouraging cautious or extremely uncautious play by revealing what the danger is, or the potential danger, even without like triggering it specifically.
Yeah, I think the idea of like tactical, being a GM and making a cool tactical situation, it's like another layer is like knowing your optimal strategy and knowing when to employ it or knowing when to just bluff with it, right? It's like, I know what can kill my players, right? Everyone, like every GM knows how to just dismantle every player because you have perfect knowledge, right, of the situation. You could just pick and choose whatever monster you want or combination of whatever. And, you know, as far as the dice goes, I mean, yeah, there's some, you know, probability mixed in. But realistically, like, you know the counter to a player, right? You know how to deal with that player. So, you know, it's really easy to build an encounter to dismantle them. But the fact is, like, if you build an encounter that way, you don't actually have to deploy everything and do everything in that optimal way. You can do that optimal way once, so, you know, the players think about it and be like, okay, maybe we should diversify my strategy a little bit just to put like the fear into them. But you don't actually have to beat them into the dirt with it. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like fighting something twice, or with like a couple of rounds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or just, you know, show them how cool you could be, and then get in their head like, maybe I should try harder, or maybe I should think a little bit more than like I just move up and then now I just wail on something till it's dead, right?
Yeah, that could be a good way if you want to encourage people to try and mix up their tactics and maybe think a bit more about what their character does.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that is a long chunk of advice. I guess we'll call that the third tip.
Ah, yes, the Omega third tip.
But yeah, we definitely covered like a whole bunch of different things this week, so hopefully everybody was able to get something useful out of it, whether it's about, narrative focus, player experience, or just doing a big old spectacle set piece combat. Again, if you have some specific things you want to ask about, if you have some specific questions that are on your mind, just drop them in a comment below or hit us up on Twitter at WinWithDice, and we will try to we'll put it in the lists so that when we do an episode like this, we can talk about it. Of course, some of our episodes are also recaps of previous games, so if you want to hear us get into details of specific game sessions and campaigns, be sure to subscribe to see more of our episodes and hit that notification bell so you get notified when there's a new podcast episode, or even when we go live, because now we're doing 3 gaming live streams a week. Got Outer Worlds Thursdays, Skyrim Fridays, and now Mass Effect Sundays. So little bit of stuff. If you want to see some RPGs, I guess this is the place for it. All those games are going to be around for like forever, because I'm only playing them like 3 hours a week, so I'm never going to stop playing Skyrim.
It'll be years till Calvin finally beats Skyrim.
So yeah, you want to see that? I would like to get to the other Mass Effects, but the way I play, like, that's not going to happen, because I like to do side stuff. So if you want to see that, and Mass Effect is surprisingly hard. I don't know if I put that out there, but it was surprisingly frustrating.
Oh yeah, Mass Effect 1 is it's a good game, but it's not a great game. Like, it's actually like kind of janky, but like
that's what I'll blame it on. I'll blame it on the jank.
I think honestly, yeah, in my opinion, Mass Effect 2 is the best version of those games. I had the most amount of fun with it, and the gameplay itself was the best, but that's just me.
Well, when I get there, I will be able to judge for myself. But I just recruited Liara, so I got a minute to go. But if you want to see those, be sure to subscribe and check them out. And of course, we got to give shoutouts to people such as Shaka's Field Guide to Umfukane, a Lancer setting that you can get off of itch.io. We'll have a link to that below. You can check it out. You can get it. You can get the LCP file to put in your CompCons. You get the mech parts that come with it as well. And you get a really interesting setting to read about and lean into and play with to add onto the canon Lancer setting. There's also Celeste's Lancer RPG NPC guides, which are different guides on how you can use certain types of NPCs in the Lancer game. Again, you can read those, check those out. They might give you different tactical ideas, whether you're a new GM or a experienced GM in Lancer. The Replay podcast, which I'm a fan of, which I've been trying to listen to a bit more recently. I've been listening to like a lot of podcasts and stuff, so. But this one specifically, it's about underrepresented gamers and their allies just having a space to share their voice and their opinions on things in the gaming sphere, whether it's video games, tabletop games, anything else like that. And of course, I gotta give a big old shout out to the Untold Stories Project, where I'm at every week, usually playing Mutants and Masterminds. I have a whole lot of fun in that campaign. We've been doing a bit of a body swap thing, and we've also been fighting some ghosts. Well, some of it was fighting, some of it was releasing their spirits. You know how that kind of thing goes. We had a pretty tough ghost fight towards the end, but the team really turned it around, and it was a really exciting battle, so definitely go check that out. And of course, check out their City of Destiny game, which is on Tuesdays, which is another Mutants and Masterminds campaign series. And I think they announced this already, so I can talk about it. Their Suicide Squad game will be back on... Actually, I think it's on the Wednesday, so the same day you're listening to this will be part 2 of their Suicide Squad game, which I'm in, and I'm playing Peacemaker.
Oh my god.
So
nice.
A lot of pressure. I actually had to I got because we're in Canada, so the Peacemaker show is on the Crave service here, so I just got a month of it this morning so I can like cram the show before the game.
I gotta study my character.
Basically, because when we did the first one I hadn't seen the movie.
Oh my god. Nice.
I had to like use interview clips of John Cena to figure out what am I supposed to sound like. So hopefully I'll be more in character. If you missed the last episode of that or the previous part of that, we were sort of assigned to steal this thing. The Justice League's involved. We might have killed well, not even might have killed the Flash. We 100% killed the Flash. Ooh boy, it's a thing. So definitely go check that out. It should be on the 26th if I have my schedule correct. And yeah, I think that's gonna do it for this episode.
Yeah. Man, every time you hear that little bit of what's going on, it's just like, bleh. What?
Yeah, that's
cool every single time.
It's so much fun. I like I like just playing stuff, and then I don't have to like figure things out. I just have to be along for the ride and intervene at certain moments. Especially that game. I had a really fun rivalry with the Bloodsport player in that one. I mean, obviously, if you've seen the movie. So, yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun to get back to that. And they have some other cool stuff coming up later in the year, so stick around.
Yeah. Well, you know what to do.
Oh, of course I do. Everybody out there who's listening in, just remember to keep on winning with dice, and we'll see you next week.
See you guys.